Işık Üniversitesi etabında öğleden sonra iki değerli sanatkarımızın bir halk havaları konseri var. Bizlere mikrotonların Anadolu'da aslında çok doğallıkla gerçekleşen bir olgu olduğunu ispat edecek bir dinleti gerçekleştirecekler. Sahneye alkışlarınızla Ekrem ATAER'i ve Savaş Karaman'ı davet ediyorum.
Oradan mikrofonum var mı? Sen. Efendim hoş geldiniz hepiniz. Biz de sevindik burada olmaktan. İyi bir buluşma. Bundan daha farklı bir buluşmayı Strasbourg Üniversitesi'nde bir sene kadar önce yapmıştık müzisyen dostlarımızla. Birazdan size dinleteceklerimiz, dinleyeceğiniz eserler hiçbir kurgusu olmadan Anadolu'da yaşayan bu eseri üreten, hiçbir kurgu olmadan, masa başında hiçbir çalışma olmadan yapılmış anlık üretimlerdir. Onların kadim öğretileri, kadim müzik ve prozodya öğretileri bize böyle bir mirası bırakmış. Biz işi biraz daha fazla bilenler gibi görünenler, onların üretimlerine baktığımız zaman şaşkınlık içerisinde kalıyoruz. Kendi iç armonileri ve prozodilerinin bu kadar hatasız oturmaları ve tonları bu kadar iyi kullanmaları noktasında. Birazdan bizden dinleyeceğiniz çalışmalar, aslında hiçbir akademik altyapısı olmamış gibi görünen, hiçbir hazırlığı olmamış gibi görünen, doğrudan doğruya kadim öğretilere ve Sümer'den bugüne kadar bu topraklarda olan birikimin mini minnacık örnekleri. Hoş geldiniz, sefalar getirdiniz.
Dedik ata bindirdik Leyli can. Hayır dua ile yola gönderdik. Kıble tarafından elden aldırdık Leyli can. kartalı vuralım, vuralım, dalga getir şu gelini, bulalım, bulalım. Biz gelinsiz nasıl köye varalım, varalım. Nettin Kızılırmak zilha gelini. Anam, anam, anam, anam, allı gelini. Yavrum, yavrum, yavrum, yavrum, zilha gelini. Kızılırmak bırakmamış huyunu, huyunu. Kurban ettik sürüleri, koyunu, koyunu. Göremedim güveyimin toyunu, toyunu. Nettin Kızılırmak zilha gelini. Anam, anam, anam, anam, allı gelini. Yavrum, yavrum, yavrum, yavrum, zilha gelini.
Bravo.
Küçük yaşta gurbete de gezer divana, divana. Defteri kalemi elde yazar divana, divana. Defteri kalemi elde yazar divana, divana. Minnet etmem ben feleğe, aşığım ben bir meleğe. Hiç oldum girdim eleğe. Süzer divana, divana. Bun oldum girdim eleğe. Süzer divana, divana. Seydi Meftuni'nin dili hakka ayan olsun hali. Taşa değse aşkın yeli, tozar divana, divana. Taşa değse aşkın yeli, tozar divana divana. Dünya umuruna meylini verme, sen de kurtulmazsın ecel elinden, ecel elinden. Menzil aldım diye göksünü germe, göksünü germe, sen de kurtulmazsın ecel elinden, ecel elinden. Hani Meryem hani, onun oğlu İsa, onun oğlu İsa, elinde cerrah olur idi asa. Polat kavmiyle cengelerdi Musa, o da kurtulmadı ecel elinden, ecel elinden. Dervişunuz eydür dinine iman, dinine iman. Tacı tahtı kaldı, göçtü Süleyman. Lokmanlar derdine bulamadı derman, o da kurtulmadı ecel elinden, ecel elinden. tekrarına böyle yoluna minnetli yar bana lazım değilsen. Deli gönül sevmiş vazgelmek olmaz, cefalı yar bana lazım değilsen. Deli gönül sevmiş vazgelmek olmaz, cefalı yar bana lazım değilsen. Oy deli gönül sevmiş vazgelmek olmaz. Gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru. Kanlar ağladı, çeşmim yaşı sel sel oldu çağladı. Ölüm geldi çevre yanım dolandı, tutmasa da candan lazım değilsen. Ölüm geldi çevre yanım dolandı, tutma cenazemden lazım değilsen. Oy ölüm geldi çevre yanım dolandı, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru. Sevdası hep güllerine, senin tatlı dilin yadellerine. Çık salın sevdiğim engellerine, görünme gözüme lazım değilsen. Çık salın sevdiğim engellerine, görünme gözüme lazım değilsen. Oy çık salın sevdiğim engellerine, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru, gönül kalk gidelim sılaya doğru. Efendim şimdi de size bir deme, bir değiş, bir dua zimam örneği vereceğiz. Yine Anadolu'dan bir örnek vereceğiz. Burada iki farklı teknik, hem tezene, mızrap dediğimiz enstrümantin, aparatın kullanılması, hem de parmaklarla bizim şelpe dediğimiz teknolojiyle ilgili, çalış teknolojisiyle ilgili. Madem ki ben bir insanım, hakkın varlık deryasıyım. Madem ki ben bir insanım, hakkın varlık deryasıyım. Madem ki ben bir insanım, İnsan hakta, hak insanda, insan hakta, hak insanda. Arıyorsan bak insanda. Çok marifet var insanda, madem ki ben bir insanım. Çok marifet var insanda, madem ki ben bir insanım. Yazabilirim, Tevrat'ı yazabilirim, İncil'i dizebilirim. Kur'an'ı sezebilirim, madem ki ben bir insanım. Kur'an'ı sezebilirim, madem ki ben bir insanım. temenni dilekler, hız gelir şarkı felekler. Bana eğilsin melekler madem ki ben bir insanım. Bana eğilsin melekler madem ki ben bir insanım. Daimiyim harap benim, daimiyim harap benim, ayaklarda türap benim. Aşk ehline şarap benim madem ki ben bir insanım. Aşk ehline şarap benim madem ki ben bir insanım. Dost. Sağ olun.
Bu harikulade, yürek yakan, Anadolu'nun bağrından kopmuş şahane halk havalarımız ve türkülerimiz performansı dolayısıyla sevgili Üstad Ekrem ATAER'i kutluyorum ve tabii Savaş Karaman'ı kutluyorum. Kendilerine çiçeklerimizi takdim etmek istiyorum.
Çiçeksiniz ya bu. Mikrotonlar bunlar.
Ve küçük bir de ödülümüz, teveccühümüz. Buyurunuz.
Teşekkür ederiz, harika.
Buyurunuz. Tekrar tebrik ediyoruz. Sağ olun. Evet sevgili konuklarımız, sevgili katılımcılarımız, now again in English, so that our simultaneous translators can get into action. I would like to invite to the stage for this session, for this panel, Aaron Andrew Hunt from Indiana and Anthony Prechtl from San Diego. Continuing with the vitalizing concerts and panels of this international meeting, I would like to pass on the microphone to Anthony Prechtl, who will demonstrate to us his accomplishments in dynamic tonality, along with his colleagues Bill Sefares and Andrew Milne, with whom he worked in collaboration. Please, Anthony.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Okay. So my name is Anthony Prechtl, as Dr. Ozan said, and I'm going to talk today about dynamic tonality. And dynamic tonality is basically a system for helping people to make microtonal music. It was designed to be extremely easy to use. In my opinion, you don't really need any background in microtonal music. You don't even need much of a background in regular music. And actually, part of the benefit is that if you do have the background, it's really helpful, even though you don't really need it. So I'm going to be demonstrating several different programs from dynamic tonality. First, I'm going to be talking about Hex, which is on the screen right now. And Hex is the dynamic tonality sequencer, basically how people can create sequences of notes and arrange them into a composition. And then after I discuss that, I will talk about our dynamic tonality synthesizers, which are what actually make the sound. So I'll begin by actually, I just wanted to show this quick picture of this is a so-called normal piano roll sequencer. I think it's from Sonar, and I'm assuming several of you are probably familiar with this style of this method of composing music. But for those who aren't, you have on the x-axis, the horizontal direction, you have time, and on the y-axis, the vertical direction, you have pitch. So you have all these notes from the piano on the left side, and basically you can draw in notes. And when you draw in the notes, you can arrange them in a sequence, and then you press play, and it basically goes from the left of the screen to the right and plays all of your notes in the horizontal sequence. But that is the piano roll sequencer, and what we've done with Hex is instead we've replaced the piano with a hexagonal lattice, and it's currently set to 12-tone equal temperament. So let me see if I can find, we have, so say this lane right here is a C, followed by a D, followed by an E, F, and then G, H, or G, A, excuse me. So basically you have all of the white notes from the piano as white notes in this lattice. And you have the black notes from a piano as the darker colored hexagons in the lattice. So let me just play my amazing composition. Yep, so that's what it sounds like. So just like a normal sequencer, it has all of your basic controls. You can, create sequences and full-on compositions, and you press play and go back. It's pretty standard. So what I want to do now is actually load a piece of music, not one that I have written, but one that my colleague Andy Milne has written, and he wrote it as a very good example of dynamic tonality. So this is no longer in 12-tone equal temperament, as you can see, but I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. First, I'll just start by playing this example. And it goes on, but I will pause there. So basically, really the idea behind dynamic tonality is this lattice that you see on the left. So I want to describe that in a little bit more detail and show a little bit more of it. So basically, you can click in the lattice and drag it around so that you can see the whole thing. You can zoom in and out. But most importantly, you can rotate it. And this rotation is essentially the basis of tuning music with dynamic tonality. So if I can go back to my default settings really quick. There, now I can rotate the full angle.
What does it do in effect, this rotation?
Well, what it does is it changes the pitches of each note. So in this lattice, you have these, what are called note lanes. The note lanes are what you draw notes into. And every note lane on the right over here is connected to a button in the lattice. And so when you rotate the lattice, you can see that the pitches change their height, or I should say the buttons change their height.
In relation to each other,
Yes.
in a special way.
No, I think it's special, but it's just what you see, in other words. So what you see on the right is exactly the pitch of the note. So if I play Andy's piece again.
In a different setting this time.
Yes. I don't know if it will sound good, but we'll see. And I can also change the tuning dynamically.
That's quite a toy.
So it can obviously be pretty radical.
Fantastic piece
I don't
of work.
I don't necessarily recommend such radical changes mid-piece.
I
but
would,
Okay.
even if you don't.
I do too.
Thank you. Normally, when I've worked with it, I work with very small changes. Basically, you can make it so that you can play a piece, say, in 12-tone equal temperament, right here.
That's the size of the fifth that you just entered in cents.
It is, yes. In this case, it's the fifth. If I go much smaller, then it becomes the third.
So it's generally the generator interval.
It's
there.
exactly the generator, yes. So if I go back to 700 cents for an exact 12-tone equal temperament, I can play, and who knows how this will sound because this piece wasn't made for 12-tone equal temperament, but basically I can make very small adjustments. Okay, that's a horrible example. But basically, you can play in 12-tone, but also reap the benefits of other tuning systems mid-song. So if you have a particular section of your piece that you want to be played in, a just intonation or any other tuning, you can just do that and move back to 12-tone or whatever you want mid-piece.
I would like to ask a question right away. Is it possible to instruct the program to enter specific values at specific instances throughout the piece?
Yes, it is. Let me see if I can demonstrate that. I'll go back to Andy's tuning. I think it was around 300 something. Oh, he has it right here, 379. So that's his initial tuning. And now if I just double click somewhere, I can go to, say, 400. And back down to 380.
Ingenious.
Of course, I just entered these values randomly, so I'm not claiming that that's supposed to be amazing. As is, I should say.
The technique is quite amazing,
Thank
I would
you.
say.
So let me just zoom out so I can see more of what I'm doing here. You can adjust settings of the lattice itself, such as the number of, well, basically the number of columns in the lattice. So you can have very many notes or fewer.
But you have to fill in each new one that appears. You have to notate each new line that appears.
I think so. I haven't tried messing with the number of notes in the middle of writing a song. This is all very new and still in the making. So eventually, yes, you will be able to do that for sure. And then you have other basic sequencer functions such as your tempo, sort of a basic time signature. It doesn't have to be, it basically just divides the measure into however many so-called beats or divisions of the beat that you want. So I am going to leave hex for now and move on to the actual sound making in dynamic tonality, because hex is just a sequencer. It basically it does send MIDI to the other dynamic tonality synthesizers. And this is the one that I was using. It's called 2032. And basically on the left over here, you have this slider, which does exactly the same thing as this slider in hex, except without all the cool graphics. But you do see the the tuning, the generator value right here. So for 12 tone equal temperament, and maybe I will just briefly show that on the actual keyboard.
Do you need a camera for me to show your fingers to the, or you will do
I
it?
would, but I think it'll be okay.
All right
if-
then.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yok, o dursun. Ya havada gösterecek. You will show us in the
There we
air
go.
what you are
Perfect.
doing.
Yes. So I'm not really used to playing in the air, holding one-handed, so let's see how this goes.
Can I play with the slider as you play?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, go on.
So basically, mid-chord, you can change the intonation of the chord. Or, mid-melody, you can make it more expressive by adjusting the tuning of the notes as you play. So far I've really just been talking about the tuning of the scale in dynamic tonality, which is all based on this visualization. But it's really only one part of dynamic tonality. The other part is the way it can tune the spectrum of the individual notes in the scale.
You mean the harmonics?
Yes, basically taking the harmonics and making them inharmonic.
Realigning the harmonics.
Yes. So the way it works is, maybe I should start by just giving a brief example of how harmonics work. Yeah. No, I guess I won't because I don't have it, but basically, okay, so basically to just give a brief example, if you play a note, we're all probably aware that sound is more or less vibrations in the air. And the thing is, it vibrates at a certain frequency, but not just one, it vibrates at many frequencies. And the way we can distinguish pitched sounds from non-pitched sounds, it's, I think you would call it an auditory illusion, because in fact there are many frequencies, but humans only perceive one pitch, even though there are so many frequencies. So what we've done, when I say spectral tuning, I mean that you're tuning the frequencies of the harmonics so that they are no longer integer multiples of the fundamental. And instead, what they are is they're mapped to a temperament, which you can specify up here. There are 3 available ones. And when you choose one, it basically maps the partials away from harmonicity, in which they're perfect, exact, integer multiples of the fundamental, and it moves them away from that to the tuning that you've specified in your scale. And what we have found, and what I'll demonstrate, is that it can make tunings that are radically different from what we're used to. It can make them sound in tune.
It would sound consonant, although inharmonic.
Yes, exactly. So, if I start here, this is about just intonation, somewhere very close to this. And that was 5-tone equal temperament, but that didn't have any spectral aligning. So I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but at least for me, the 5-tone chord, when it's not spectrally aligned, is very dissonant. Let me play it again, and you can see for yourself. So, what it sounds like with the spectral retuning, or I'll just do a bend so that you can see, or so you can hear it.
It became harmonious.
Yes.
After the realignment of the harmonics, the partials.
Yes. So now, chords that previously, at least to me, like I said, I can't speak for everyone, but at least to me, these chords all sounded, I don't want to say bad, but they sounded dissonant.
Discordant, according to Mons.
Yeah.
Discordant.
But when you realign the frequencies that make up the pitches, they no longer sound dissonant. And so what we've wanted to do with this is make it so that the inherent dissonance that you experience when you try new tunings is no longer necessarily a factor in the final output. Basically, just so that you can get rid of that and just experience the tunings the way they were, in my opinion, meant to be experienced. And of course, I've just been playing with 5-tone equal temperament, but I'll move around a little bit. So this is 7-tone equal temperament. And not spectrally aligned. So, I mean, 7-tone equal temperament is pretty dissonant compared to 5. So it kind of demonstrates the boundaries that we're working with, at least aesthetically, I think.
And 12 equals stands just right in the middle.
Yeah,
the combination
roughly.
of 7 plus 5.
Yeah. Is that a coincidence?
I wouldn't know. It follows a certain Fibonacci pattern, I think.
Yeah. So, as you can see in hex, there is a bass note upon which all other notes rotate. In this case, it appears to be this one right here. So as I rotate, the pitch of this note never changes. It always stays the same because everything else is rotating around it. So in that note, the way it sounds, it's this note. So as I change this slider, you'll see that the note will not change. Whoa.
The wrong note.
Wrong note.
No, that's wrong too. Not even that.
I must have done something.
You are rotating on the wrong axis. Perhaps.
Oh, here we go. That's the note. Good ear. So, what I was saying is that as I change this slider, this note will never change pitch. But this is a really excellent way to demonstrate the spectral retuning. So, if I move this slider all the way to the right, it becomes fully spectrally tempered.
Spectrally realigned,
realigned.
Accordingly with the tuning selected. That
Yes.
not tempered, perhaps, but realigned. It would be a more appropriate term, I would say.
Exactly, yeah. So now, as I change this slider, you'll see that the fundamental frequency will never change, but the timbre of the note, in this case meaning the spectrum, will change. So, what I wanted to do was actually show what that looks like. Let me see. So I created this wave file that is based on I used a different program that I'm going to demonstrate next. Oops. Sorry, it was a little loud. Let me. So that's what it sounds like.
The harmonic spectrum moved about a minor sixth, the interval of a minor sixth, I think.
Okay.
All right.
And this is a spectrogram, which I believe was shown, not this particular one, but a spectrogram was shown earlier. In this case, we have time in the x-axis and pitch in the y-axis. And these are the different frequencies. Are they visible? Yeah, they're visible. So you have here the fundamental, in this case, didn't change, and neither did the one above it. But as you go higher, basically what happens is the partials, the harmonics, their frequencies get stretched upwards into, in this case, 5-tone equal temperament, which is up here. Oops. So, how am I doing on time?
You are very good. You have 15 more minutes.
Okay. Then I will briefly demonstrate another dynamic tonality synthesizer. This one is called the Viking. Oops. Cool. So this one is quite similar to 2032, the previous synthesizer I showed. The main difference is the way that the sound is synthesized. The previous synthesizer focuses on physical modeling, which means basically modeling physical objects. So I think I had a cello sound that I was using. So basically it is intended to sound vaguely like a cello. Of course, it will never actually sound like a cello because when you change the tuning and the spectrum, it'll mess things up. But the idea was to make it as organic as possible. And in the Viking, we didn't use that, that idea. Instead of having it as organic as possible, it was more of a purposely electronic sound. Okay, so you can't really see my fingers. Maybe I can...
This thing accepts MIDI input, right?
Yes.
Okay, we have a
Yes.
MIDI keyboard. Klavyemizi getirebilir miyiz? And we also have the cable, thanks to Robert forgetting to take it when he was coming here from all the way from Chile.
We have a little MIDI keyboard.
Yeah, we have a little one. We can have the big one also. It would prove interesting to see how it would sound when playing with a MIDI keyboard. Evet, onu da alalım. Şöyle koyalım.
Can you plug it
Oh,
in?
let me just start with this little one.
In case it's just too much of a toy, we have the real thing here. But of course, these are all toys, very expensive, very technologically improved,
Yeah.
much developed toys. This is just a trinket in comparison. Okay. Okay, let me have the USB. You can have it any way you like.
Well, let me just see. if
Try
this,
the little one first.
yeah,
again.
let's try this one first.
Uh-huh. I would like to have a go with that myself. Show the audience how you do it.
Okay.
Does it accept two MIDI inputs at the same time?
I think it might blow it up.
Oh, we shouldn't try it then.
We can. We can
One
try
at,
it. I don't know.
one at a time, I don't know. Maybe I'll go easy on the keys.
Okay. Or should I just unplug this one?
Maybe you can let it remain, and you can plug this one also. So we'll try if it will actually work with two MIDI keyboards. I won't go too hard on the keys. When,
Okay.
Okay, we take that out. This one. Okay. We plug this in.
We'll see if
Okay,
it works.
So how many MIDI inputs can the Viking take in at the same time?
Good question. I think it only takes one. I didn't think about that.
Because this is so much fun that you would like to plug in several instruments at the same time and make an instant jig out of it.
Let me see.
Again, so it's
MIDI mate
it
two.
will
MIDI
be
mate.
one of those two.
Yeah.
You won't know until you. Is it on? Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds its own. Bunun sesini kısabilir miyim volume? Turn the volume down. Only kapatalım That's the Viking?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Modify
now-
it. Modify this. Yeah. That's so much fun. I would like to stay here and play it for some hours.
Well, I guess we'll be outside later, and I can have that available for people to try.
Yes. Let it remain like so then.
Okay, just so that you can play when you get bored.
I can't imagine how I will get bored with such a brilliant presentation.
Thank you. So I'll make that it for the Viking. Before I show the last one, for the sake of time, I really wanted to show a piece that was written. I didn't write it. It was written by Bill Cetheres, one of the original creators of dynamic tonality. And what he does is demonstrate a use for dynamic tonality that isn't immediately obvious. Because for me, the way I originally pictured dynamic tonality was just a way to basically morph tunings over time for basically purposes of intonation. What he has done in this particular piece was morph the tuning from chord to chord, making it so that it's no longer just a chord progression, but also a tuning bend progression. And he calls this piece slow Cs because the chord progression is really just a combination of C chords that are tuned differently. So let me just play it. So, I mean, I think it's an absolutely beautiful piece, and it really demonstrates kind of pushing the boundaries of dynamic tonality. And that was created, the piece was created with the last synthesizer that I'll probably just briefly show. It's called the Transform Synth.
These aural synesthesia feelings actually invoke perhaps even the final frontiers of the human mind in terms of creativity.
It's very surreal.
Musical creativity, indeed.
Yeah. And sort of the benefit to me is that dynamic tonality is extremely easy to use. It doesn't really, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, it doesn't really require any microtonal music knowledge because you're really just playing around with the slider until it sounds the way you want. So this is the Transform Synth. It's probably the most advanced of the dynamic tonality synthesizers. And it looks quite a bit differently, yes?
We see our name there in Turkish.
Yes.
53 Waldensian commas.
Yeah. So if we were to do that, I believe that's at about 702 cents, which, let me just pull up hex really quick. It's at about 702. As you can see, it doesn't particularly look all that different from 12-tone equal temperament at this zoom level. But we can zoom in a little more to see the nuances. However, I mean, if you were to really have all 53 tones, you would need many hexagons. So to zoom out, you would really need to push the boundaries of the number of notes on the screen. So it's not immediately practical to attempt to do any possible maqam in dynamic tonality. And that's actually something that I'm hoping that we can learn about more in this meeting, basically finding how we can incorporate pre-existing tunings into dynamic tonality, because as you can see in the Transform Synth, we already have a number of them just notated here for reference to the right and left of the tuning slider. So
I may already have an idea on how to do that, but later on I will tell you
Okay.
after your speech.
Okay. And so, as I said, the Viking is different from 2032 because 2032 attempts to model physical objects, whereas the Viking was more intended to be used probably specifically for electronic music. The Transform Synth instead is based on actual sound samples. So I believe this was originally a clarinet sound that has been morphed. So there are several recordings, for example, an oud.
These are sampled sounds.
Yeah, they're sampled and they have been analyzed and then re-synthesized.
Spectrally morphed.
Yes. Of course, it doesn't really sound like an oud when it's tuned differently, but
So you actually removed the spectra of clarinet so that you can calibrate each partial when you move the slider for that instrument.
yes, it's very much like a vocoder, except whereas a vocoder usually just fixes at a certain note. In this case, it can not only do that, but also change the spectrum. So if I guess you could say this is vaguely what an oud would sound like if it was spectrally retuned. Of course, it doesn't really sound like an oud anymore.
It's like a Comanche.
Yeah.
More like a Comanche as it was.
But it does have an organic quality, I think, which I guess it reminds me of we also have another program that we're still working on, in which basically you can speak or sing or just play into a microphone, and then it automatically retunes the input in real time. So this could be a great way to incorporate actual instruments into a performance in line with people playing with MIDI keyboards. So it could be a good way to basically just unite the electronic sounds with actual acoustic sounds. So I think that about wraps it up for my presentation of dynamic tonality.
Excellent timing. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you.
I'll admit once again that I'm quite impressed with the dynamic tonality technique. It very much broadens the horizons orally. It creates interesting synesthesia sensations in the human ear with these morphing chords and harmonies and the ability to just twist it around with the slide of a slider. It is certainly marvelous. I think it to be marvelous, and I congratulate you and your colleagues with the greatest extent of appreciation. Really, I can touch a few keys right away if it works.
I closed it.
You closed it.
But I'll open it up.
Let it remain open for anybody who would like to come up to the stage and try it out. Indeed. Hakikaten gelip bir iki deneme yapmak isteyen varsa burada ona da o imkanı yaşatmak isteriz. So I will have a few questions in the meanwhile to Anthony. Anthony'ye sorusu olanlardan, yes, Joe would like to ask you a question.
Yes, can you just go over again the differences between the Transform Synth, the Viking, and 2032?
Yeah, absolutely.
I got them, but I want to just get a better...
Okay, so the Transform Synth, dynamic tonality is the same in all three. It's just the way that sound is synthesized that is different. And in Transform Synth, it transforms actual audio files that are recordings of instruments. In the Viking, it uses additive synthesis, in which the partials, the harmonics, are generated separately as pure sine waves. And in 2032, it's a physical modeling synthesizer that uses something called modal synthesis, which is similar to additive synthesis, but instead of using sine waves to generate the harmonics, it uses filters which more or less behave like actual instruments do. So that's why we used it to help model physical objects. So the short answer is that one of them is based on samples, one of them is more or less for electronic style music, and one of them is to model actual objects.
Can you please just say more about the Viking again?
Yeah.
Again,
I'm just trying to get the notes down. Can you tell us more about the Viking again?
Yeah, so the Viking, it is an additive synthesizer.
tell us what additive synthesizer means.
Yes. So previously I mentioned the fact that in harmonic sounds, the frequencies of the harmonics are integer multiples of the fundamental. And what is done in additive synthesis is each frequency, each harmonic, is generated separately as sine waves. And that's what we've done in the Viking, is we've generated the harmonics separately as sine waves. So there are, I think, around 30 harmonics.
Partials.
Partials, yes.
Played simultaneously.
Yes, so you have 30 sine waves, and their frequencies vary as you adjust the dynamic tonality settings.
Excellent. So we will have some more questions. daha çok soru talep ediyoruz bu çok etkileyici sunum karşısında.
I have a question.
Yes, that's all right.
The hex synthesizer, you talked about the MIDI output.
Yeah.
Presumably the MIDI input would work very well with some of the Axis keyboards or Microzone keyboards.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. It does work with it, not natively, but we have released a program. I meant to show this earlier. This is the Dynamic Tonality website. And at the very top is a new application called Relayer. And what it does is convert the input from the see-through axis 49, which is a hexagonal lattice controller.
Can you show it on the web see-through keyboard? I think they have a web page. That's a trademark, by the way, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a trademark.
It's,
Probably.
It's the model name, or I think it's the trademark. So they have this keyboard, so you
Yeah, so
have
I'll-
incorporated a special mapping for that.
Yes, we've mapped the MIDI notes from the see-through axis, and we've mapped them to the notes used in dynamic tonality. And it also does various mappings for a regular computer keyboard as well.
Can we get this to work with Aaron's specially manufactured Uplex just standing over there? It accepts USB input, maybe adding more hexagonals so that we can press at the same time a dozen or so keys, having such microtonal harmonies as allows. Does your Viking synthesizer accept such an input, or just restricted to 12 keys at a time?
It's not restricted. You can specify the number of voices that are allowed right here. I guess it goes all the way up to 16.
16 keys
16
to the octave or to the interval of repetition?
I think I misunderstood you. I meant simply that you can play 16 notes at
Yeah,
once.
that's polyphonic limitation.
Yes.
But what I'm desiring to know is musically, for example, in the hex arrangement, you added more hexagonals as the pitches, the need for pitches rise. So I would wonder if it is maybe possible in that fashion to connect Aaron's keyboard and, for example, enter at the same time 16 different pitches, so as to perhaps cram into the octave more than 12 notes.
Yeah, it's not currently possible, but we have, we'll soon be published in Computer Music Journal about hex, and with that publication, which will be in a few months, we are planning a new version of hex with updates, and that'll be something that we'll look into. Basically, so that you can have more notes than are currently possible. Because currently, I think there are 360-something total possible notes. Not in one octave, but just total.
Are these software free of charge?
Yes.
Can you show us the address where we can obtain them?
Yes.
And in the meanwhile, I'll tell about my idea. But first, some more questions if we can have them. Because we have time. Zamanımız olduğu için bir iki soru da alabileceğiz.
I don't have another question, but I have a remark about this last topic. I had a discussion with your partner developer, Andrew MELM, about this very topic, using in particular the Tonoplexus keyboard with these synthesizers. The basic issue is that the Tonoplexus, in one octave of a Tonoplexus, there are 2 MIDI channels for over 200 MIDI notes. And the problem is the synthesizers need to be redesigned to interpret input from different channels differently.
Different MIDI cable entries, the different ports, you mean?
They're actually not ports, they're just channels.
The MIDI channels arriving from just one single MIDI port.
Yeah.
So you have 32 ports, the channels maximum available in Uplex.
16.
16 at one time.
Yeah. Hence the 8-octave limit for the keyboard. Each octave being 2 MIDI channels.
Each octave arriving from 2 distinct channels
On one port.
on one port.
Yeah.
So that complete. I mean, you are talking about the whole range U-plex or tonal plex. So as to fully benefit from the 16 available MIDI channels.
Right.
All right, I got it. Now I would like to remark also about my idea that just came to me. Since you talked how this could be applicable to the Turkish makam music, you wondered, can you once again bring hex to the screen?
Yes.
Okay. In hex, I noticed that it is indeed very much possible to twist and warp the design, the alignment for altogether for the whole of the notes that have been thus entered. But here is an idea. In Turkish makam music, or the currently applied Aralezgi Uzdilek tuning system, some of the notes are indeed could be tolerably fixed. But whereas some others are very much fluid. For example, perde segah, you've seen me practice on the tambur or the kanun. This certain perde segah, for instance, or evich, or in makam hüzzam, we heard perde hisar, very fluid up there in between the 2 notes of the Western pianos. These are very flexible. Thereby, I would suggest perhaps 2 layers of hex. One sort of aligned to Aralezgi Uzdilek as a preliminary fixed approach, and the other layer containing only the very fluid pitches like segah and evich, thereby allowing instant retuning without damaging the fixed layer, separately warping just those pitches that are ascribed to be very flexible.
Yeah.
So 2 layers, it's operating independently from each other. How would that work?
I think it would be easy in terms of tuning the scale. You could tune the scale that way. It's not very clear to me how the spectrum could be tuned unless you just fixed it to the underlying one.
How it would be tuned now, that's a very difficult proposition, I understand, but the deal with, for example, the location of perde segah. In Rust, it goes closer to the position of, for example, in the süpürde diapason, when the Rust notes are aligned more or less to the piano C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. The segah note in Rast makam comes closer to the E of the piano. Whereas in makam uşak, it goes all the way to the neutral second zone from D to E, that makes a neutral second. With Arabic music, Arabic makam music, even a little bit lower than that. So there is this huge area in which perde segah can move about. So I would suggest a second layer to just incorporate those very flexible fluid pitches that warp about in terms of the makam being used. How to make that correspond to the dynamic tonality spectral alignment, it requires work. It requires certain amount of deliberation. But I don't think it's altogether impossible because once you know that the perde segah of the second layer is actually being slided down or up, you can incorporate that information to the background layer where the pitches you have already calibrated previously.
Yes. It sounds like what you're suggesting are very subtle changes. Am I correct?
Actually, it can go about 2 commas or a quarter tone. There's a very flexible range in which, in the case of perde segah, that particular perde moves about. In makam sabah, it is particularly fluid because it has a combination of Hüseyni and uşak in it. Uşak requiring segah to be going low, Hüseyini requiring segah to be going high. But all this, of course, open to debate because intonation is not a standardized issue. However, still, perde segah being very fluid about that mücenneb zone, which I have described earlier on yesterday. So that is an interesting area of thought, I think, one that deserves investigation.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorusu olan yoksa, peki. Now, I would like to pass the microphone on to Aaron Andrew Hunt from Indiana. He has come all the way to demonstrate for us his very exceptional work under the trademark of HPI instruments, such products as the Uplex keyboard, Scordatura sound font synthesizer, Microtonal sound font synthesizer, and possibly some very eye-filling candies other than these also. Okay, the stage is yours, Aaron.
Thank you, Ozan. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here. I'd like to thank my hosts at Işık University, and I would also like to make it known that it's here. That all the software I'm demonstrating today is free in demonstration form online, but the demo versions need to be unlocked. And as a small token of my thanks to the university, Işık will receive licenses for all the software that I will be showing today.
Much thanks for this generosity, Aaron.
It's not,
I needed to restart my computer when I plugged it in, which could be a nightmare.
okay. Talk amongst yourselves.
We have some time. We are going ahead of the schedule, so you can fill in the details in any way you like. Perhaps I could still demonstrate some sounds if your computer still receives, no, but the audio has been transferred, eh?
Yeah.
You can turn on your laptop speakers in any case.
So I can enjoy it.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Your last idea to Anthony sounded very much like the ancient Greek system with the movable notes in between.
But this movable system incorporated in... once again, Aaron.
Okay. Your last idea to Anthony sounded very much like the ancient Greek idea with the movable notes in between the fixed notes.
But you know, in the Greek perfect immutable system, the notes are fixed to their locations after a preliminary calibration, and
Right.
it goes on rolling after that just the same. But here in dynamic tonality helps realign the pitches in accordance with the harmonic distribution, the partial distribution. That is a crucial, most crucial difference that directly reflects to makam music.
I think it could be debated, though, if the Greek systems really were that fixed.
It's
Possible.
historical debate. Maybe we'll have it later on among each other. Robert, yes.
I was just going to say that I will also be offering institutional license of tunesmiths and advanced metronome to both institutions.
Much
That's my
gratitude,
gratitude
Robert.
for the
Much
visit.
gratitude.
Maybe remote.
Yes, you can, in any case, supply your website information again in Başkent University. Just perhaps show it on the screen or write it on a whiteboard. Demand in Başkent, in the session you will stage in Başkent a whiteboard so that you can write your web addresses for free access to this software. So we are having a little difficulty getting a display. Macintosh'lar yüzünden. Bak kulaklarım işte neden çalışmadı diye. Go Linux, we have a traitor among our midst. But really, these software battles between Microsoft and Apple are all killing us. So they should actually make their peace and co-develop an altogether ultimate operating platform and save us all the trouble and suffering. Traitor. Okay. Aaron, if the display is not possible, you might want to use Anthony's laptop, just in case. But no, you have Macintosh software. Do we have a working Mac, another Mac?
The computer's fine.
No, I mean for the visual, for the display.
Source? Apple F7. Okay. So wait.
Please exit the circle.
Evet Utku bir yardım edersen iyi olacak.
Please 7.
Bence source'u yanlış seçtiler.
Source'da bir değişiklik olmuyor herhalde değil mi? Hepsi aynıdır.
No signal.
Yep. See, the computer is definitely recognizing that it's plugged in. It's this that's not responding.
All right, we got a visual, thank you. Okay, Aaron, you have the stage.
Technology is the bane of our existence in the modern age, and yet we're so in love with it. On occasions like this, we need our tools to work. But it gives me a chance to say something about how fiddly things seem when they are presented this way, while what motivates us with music is feeling. So when we are concentrating on these details and we have such strong conviction about what we're talking about, it's because music is for expressing a range of human emotions. And microtuning, expanding tuning resources, is all about being able to express our emotions more clearly. So, having said this, let me start with a very simple application. This is called Scala Vista. Okay, the Scala file format is very well known in the tuning community. This is a simple text format in which tunings can be specified. So here we have the entire archive of Scala files, which at this point has grown to over 4,000 files. So a problem with something that large is that you don't know what's in it. And Scala itself is not the easiest software to use, although it's free. So I decided just for myself to make a tool that would allow me to explore what the Scala archive has to offer. So here we see a list of the 4,000 tunings in the archive. And it's a simple database, so it has simple searching features, such as looking for tunings by Dr. Yarman. Here they are. Okay, 33 tunings in the Scala archive. And that's nice enough, but music is about the sounds and how we respond. So let's listen to one of these scales. Here's a 12-note out of 100 to 35 equal tuning, which we are not
no
hearing.
sound yet.
Yeah. very close to 12. So
Try something sabahish, for example, the sabah, sabah by me, down in the bottom. Yeah, that one.
yes, this is something else you can just sort of. If we want to hear this as intervals, we can also do this. Let's. Sabah should start on what pitch?
D in süpürde, A in mansur, B in kız ahenk, and well, I get lost after that.
I'll start on D.
Okay.
Let's hear it with intervals. Okay, so you have some control over the speed, the rate at which this happens as well. Because we have just listened to a scale played in intervals, now whenever I click, I'll hear a harmonic interval. Okay, so this is a way to find out what all of these numbers mean just by using some kind of intuition, which I think is very important in music. So, other things that you can do are organize the scales that are shown by the number of tones, for example. So all 8-tone scales. This particular version is not yet available online, but I've introduced a new feature for Mac users, which is a menu extension. Let's see. I will get rid of the results here and show the entire archive. So it takes a moment in order to fill the list with 4,000 scales. There they are. Once they're there, then we have this menu extension, which is organized by the names of each scale. So if I know the name of a scale, very quickly I can pull up that scale. This in particular is sort of a theoretical one.
That was quite musical there.
Okay, so those are the main functions of the program, database program, very simple. Before I demonstrate other softwares, and I have a lot to show.
As a parenthesis, can I mention that this Scala program is created by Manuel of the Kool from Holland, Netherlands. He couldn't come to our meeting because he has become a father. His wife gave birth to a baby girl, but we would have wished him to be here nevertheless because he would have contributed much. But hopefully in the future we will find an opportunity to meet all together with him too.
Okay, so I failed to mention that I run a business, it's basically a one-man operation called HPI Instruments. So this is the website, and I did have the website open before the computer was turned off. Let me just get it started here again.
Better to use just pictures if you have them. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is the problem. It was all set up, and then obviously we had to start again. So this is the website. You can see software where you can download the software. There's information about each application here. Also, the reason that I wanted to show you this is there's a lot of other information available on the website that's kind of buried. But there's microtonal history. You can read about those people involved in pioneering work in microtonality. So there is also my own music theory, which involves a lot of reading, but there are also lots of pictures and things to listen to. So I tend to like, myself, examples with a lot of visual involvement and oral involvement. So that's what I try to do as well. And today I have a short summary of this theory. And the reason is my whole involvement with microtonality began as a doctoral dissertation, and I ended up not completing that. I quit school and then started a business kind of out of necessity, putting together instruments, doing research along these lines. And what motivated me was, well, many things, but some that come to mind based on what we've experienced here these last couple of days. In Turkish music, I see these things happening, that there's great interest in preserving the historical significance of the music, that this kind of cataloging of all of the available maqams, it's not just done out of some sort of wild obsession, but it's because this music has developed over a long period of time, and any music that has some consistency in this way has its own rules, its own way of working, its own style, its own character, and that creates strong feelings. And yet, the methods that are used to preserve this are basically external in origin. So the music notation that's being used is Western notation, with the addition of some accidentals which are then supposed to mean certain things according to this music. So it's this amalgamation. And ethnomusicologists, of course, have been doing this kind of thing since the beginning of ethnomusicology, right? Since Bartók and Kodály. So it appeared to me that this is kind of an intolerable situation, because there is no standardization, and it doesn't really represent what the thing is. Along with the history of a certain genre establishing its own rules, its own rhetorical significance, there's also this set of rules which are outlined by the structure of the material itself in a more abstract sense. And so this is what I've tried to look at in my own work. And this is what I've come up with, this theoretical system, which serves as the background for all of the work that I've done with software and also with hardware, with this keyboard. Cultivated music, really civilized cultivated music, is not only taught by rote in an oral tradition, but has a literacy. And so this is a multi-leveled endeavor, which means it's also very difficult to penetrate if you want to do anything that's different than the tradition. We are confronted then doing anything with microtonality, with music theory, also with music notation. They're very closely linked. The instruments that are used to realize the music and performance practices surrounding this practice of making music, it's now supported by our education. It's institutionalized. Well, the crowning achievements should be composition. This is vaguely Parthenon-like structure. I would have added capitals and some arches to make it look like the cistern if I had more time. So it's very problematic penetrating this structure. First, because there's there's no standardization for dealing with pitches outside of 12 tones in our education system. So there's really no foundation for this. Okay, then the performance practice is also inconsistent, and many players, especially in Western music, are just not interested in trying to do this because it's outside of their training, their experience. Of the instruments, we have strings and trombones and voices. And of course, in Turkish music, you have many instruments which already are tuned to scales other than 12-tone. But in Western music, we're stuck with lots of keyed instruments that are also stuck in this one tuning.
We share the same fate, some of us westernized part of our musicianship. We do share the same
You have
fate.
an inroad with the folk instruments. The notation, however, is a big problem. So I don't know how this structure is still standing. Because theoretically, nobody can agree what's happening here, and it just falls apart. So what we have to do is try to rebuild this, and this is where I come up with the H system. Yes, the H is for my name, so I know that's very so self-effacing of me, but I couldn't come up with a better name. I started with standard Western music theory, and the basic principles which are abstracted enough that they're not tied in necessarily with the rhetoric of history. The circle of fifths is based on a harmonic series, 3 being the first pitch, which is actually new. Comma shifting, on the other hand, is historically of the most theoretical significance, but it's never made its way into common practice in terms of the theory. There's ample evidence and experimentation with this in psychoacoustics in our modern times, and yet still we don't have a way of talking about this.
It's also called intonation drift in a soprano, alto, tenor, bass choirs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's completely tied in with performance practice. So ensembles of voices and instruments, orchestras do not play in equal temperament. They're shifting these commas around all the time.
So without the support of a piano or a guitar, for instance, or a church organ, the level of tonality rises or lowers itself depending on the modulations, sort of.
But not in a systematic fashion.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing their own thing because this isn't, it's not taught as such. It's not part of the process. More recently, in the last 100 years, this thing called the JND, which is just noticeable difference between pitches, delineates what we know to be the perceptual limits of our hearing abilities in terms of pitch discrimination. So to deal with this, I have an expanded positional notation, music notation, which is completely linear, and it gets rid of a diatonic basis in the notation as well. The circle of fifths being created requires first the octave, the maximally similar boundary. Put the name in quotes because that name comes from something later, the man-made ideas surrounding this harmonic ratio. The name comes from building a structure using this interval, and I'll be asking you to recall this at a later time. This will be a test. The average just noticeable difference is about 1/5 of an average comma. Now we will build this circle of fifths, beginning with the void. We'll start to see something that looks a little bit like tone lattices from tonal sauce software. The first new pitch is the number 3. We'll build a symmetrical structure with powers of 3. Then we employ the duplication. And the pitches end up here. Now we apply 7 letters, starting with the first pitch that was new, call it A, and then just give letters to the pitches in order. Once we do this, we take note of the distances between pitches. See that there are 2 types of distances, the smaller one and the larger one. And this is the system of 7 tones, otherwise known as the diatonic system. To this, we know that we have the 5 accidentals. Where did these come from? Take this and expand it further using more powers of 3. We get our first flat and our first sharp. Of course, Mons explained something about the historical significance of those. Here we reach the center of the octave, our 12-tone system, associated with the modern piano. If we keep going with one more, then we see that we have this small distance right in the middle, the Pythagorean comma. The numbers are getting huge, powers of 3, so let's get rid of them. We'll concentrate on letters. We just add one more and we get to 14. So many keyboards were built with split keys, sub-semitones, to play 14 pitches per octave. But we didn't stop there. Going up to 19 tones, here's a sketch of a 19-tone keyboard, and there's also a modern reconstruction of this keyboard. There's a CD available for the 19-tone paradigm. We know we have double sharps and double flats. This brings us to 31. The names here of the notes are getting less attractive, but still we have examples of keyboards that were built to play music with 31 pitches that were all unique, such as the archicembalo or the clavimusicum omnitonum. And of course, we'd be remiss not to mention the Fokker organ in Holland. The 31-tone system, you see, doesn't complete the picture because we're still left with something in the double flat region. So we end up with 35 tones if we take this to its logical conclusion, 7 letters times 5 accidentals. However, when we look at the way that this is actually used, our natural notes and sharps and flats, not all of them are used the same way. Some of them are less common, some less desirable, and some that we avoid altogether. So of our note names of 35 that are possible, 17 or thereabouts are common. The ones on the sharp side are considered higher in pitch, and those on the flat side lower in pitch. These are the conventional expectations of an educated musician in the present day. So, for example, a C flat is considered to be lower than a B natural on reflection if a musician is asked. These sharps and flats, double sharps, double flats, can be recast using new symbols I'm proposing to represent comma shifts. So shift above can be super, shift below is sub. These are terms from standard music theory with historical precedent. When we do this, we have names for pitches which are very flexible, and we can continue in the flat direction into the double flats, and yet we have names that we can use, like sub F instead of G double flat. The same in the sharps direction. We can have a super D instead of C double sharp, and when the case is that we really want a D.
20 minutes left, Aaron.
Okay. So with these 35 labels, then our extended accidentals need to continue into the triple sharps, triple flats, which is not a new idea. It's a very old idea. It's just never made its way into standard theory. We end up with 49 labels and 13 tones of pure Pythagorean. Not all of these we would use. We'd use comma-shifted names, and not just one shift, but 2. So we end up with lots of possibility for overlapping names, lots of choice. And once we do this, we have fully integrated commas with triple accidentals, sharps and flats. Now the just noticeable differences can be applied to each of these pitches. For example, A. Take the one pitch and we'll hear various versions of A now. So the A in the middle is just A. Then we have a sharp A, double sharp A, flat A, double flat, etc. Between A and sub A, now there's a continuum of pitch which we can name specifically. Even with inflections, we need the flexibility of enharmonic spelling, so the triple accidentals are used for this purpose. Now that we have the 41 tones and 5 inflections, we have about 200 pitches, 205, which reaches the limits of the human pitch perception, which is experimentally confirmed. When we look at how this relates to intervals, we consider historically perfect versus imperfect intervals and how these are used. We have augmented and diminished versions of imperfect intervals as well, some of which are avoided. Well, we need doubly diminished and doubly augmented intervals because of situations like this from actual music. You notice the bass note there is a G flat and there's a C sharp in the harmony, so we have a doubly augmented fourth. It means we also need a doubly diminished fifth. Here we have comma-shifted intervals that create interval families. For example, D to F, the minor third. We have different versions of this. A large minor third. The small minor third. 2 comma shifts make a wide minor third. 2 comma shifts down make a narrow minor third, which doesn't sound like a minor third anymore. If we look at the major third that's been shifted down twice, it's exactly almost enharmonic with the wide minor third. So we take an interval like this now. A trained musician knows F sharp to G is a minor second. Here the F sharp has been raised by a comma, the G has been lowered by a comma. So what do you think happens? We give it a name. The name is the narrow minor second, 2 commas, more narrow than normal. So now we have interval names in interval families. For example, the family of minor third intervals. Taking one of these, the large minor third, D to super F, could also be spelled as D to E sharp augmented second, or if you really want to do D to grave G flat as a diminished fourth. The tuning of the just noticeable differences also is taken care of in terms of how this would be written down and how it would be said. As a form of musical literacy, we have perfect intonation. And in addition to this, we have intonation which is not perfect. For example, you hear beating in this interval. D up to sub F sharp, the small major third. It beats. So it's not perfect. How do we make it perfect? Okay, the F sharp is raised by 1 J and D. This is the perfect small major third in the system. From there, the other qualities of intonation apply. Okay, so we have circle of fifths, commas, just noticeable difference, and now the notation. If we look at these lines and put them on their side and add some notes, this is pretty much where standard staff notation comes from. And so we have this problem that there are these 2 which are smaller and the others which are larger. We take the G then and make a clef out of it after adding a line that's conventional notation. Another approach is just to use the staff as a ruler for equal distances. Look what happens when we do this on a normal staff. At this point, there's a problem. This interval is diminished. That interval, just with the change of a clef, is perfect. So if without the clef you don't know which one it is, it's a problem. So we can solve this tritone problem using the fifth as a basic identifier. Right now, the change of position in traditional notation means either a whole step or a half step. You don't know which without a clef. So in H system, change of position is a comma shift. This gives a zone of inflection for position. Instead of half steps now, these are changes of just noticeable difference. So every position has these possibilities for notation which appears to be conventional and yet expresses all of the available pitches. The staff then is composed of a series of interlocking staves, this concept that I call a complex staff. It's based on principles of vision science. The staff of 9 lines gives us a fifth of 8 steps, which is not an even numbered or a whole numbered equal temperament, so it doesn't work. The next level, the staff of 4 lines within 5, gives us 13 lines for a fifth. Again, it doesn't work. It's a fractional equal temperament, although this was used by Yasser. At the next level...
Joseph Yasser in the theory of evolving tonality.
Correct. The last version here, 3 lines within 3 lines within 5 lines. Gives a fifth of 17 lines. It doesn't work again. So the last one, 4 within 5, or 3 within 5, 4 within 5. This ends up being the right one, 25 lines. There's our fifth. The fifth spans 24 steps, and this is equal to 41 tone equal temperament. Hence, our 41 positions and 49 labels correspond exactly to a notation system that can represent all pitches at the limits of human pitch perception. It also, by chance, just contains 12 tone equal temperament, 204 pitches. So that is the summary of the system. Now, to show how it's employed in some software, here is a basic scale editor. I showed you a scale database, which is fine, existing scales, but you want to make some music with this. So here's a program for taking any scale and placing those pitches on a keyboard. I try to make this as intuitive as possible, so here's a keyboard. I want to change the pitch, I just type it, then it changes. I want to change it in a different way. I want to use some other number. It works. If I want some kind of ratio plus a cent value, I can do that. These are equal temperaments. If I wanted some degree of 53 tone equal temperament, I do this. Okay, so after I've done that, I can play it on a keyboard. So I have a keyboard plugged in. This one.
It's the one I specifically commissioned, the Uplex, isn't it?
I won't use it just yet because this program, as you see, is really intended for standard keyboards.
Okay, then.
That will be next, though.
Next, okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm playing the pitches that I'm in control of here live on the keyboard. So this one, for example, now I'll make this I've programmed some strange things for a scale there, but I hope you can see how easy it would be then to create a scale, save that, and be able to play some music with it. This works in combination with a piece of hardware that you can then attach to a standard keyboard like this over here and play without a computer. Anyway, some of the more interesting things that this can do are using constants like pi and phi, e, gamma. Those with an interest in mathematics want to know what different numbers sound like. So if we use, for example, pi, we can transpose this interval times pi and see what it sounds like. There's also the possibility to use different functions. For example, an equal division of some value. So say we will take a pitch from the Bohl-Pierce scale. 4th degree.
For those who don't know the Bohl-Pierce scale, it's the division of the 3-tab into 12 equal portions. 13. The 3-tab standing for the octave plus a fifth due to using the number 3. The division thus becomes the 3-tab division.
Yes, 13 divisions of E, discovered jointly by
13,
Heinz Bohl and John Pierce, I believe. So this is fine as an individual degree. You may not want to go in and type all of those. You can select a range of keys then and use something to tune the range of keys. If we go to Action, Tune Algorithm. Under Algorithm, we have an arbitrary equal division. So here we can do, actually I'll use a different one. So scale from equal division. That's the wrong one. I'll just do the arbitrary equal division. 3, 1 into 13 parts. Starting degree on 1, the octave 1, and it tunes. Oh, the octave is too low to sound in the sample set, so I'll raise it up.
So that was the ball and pierce scale.
Yes, this is 13 divisions of 3. So I'm a little out of range with the keyboard there. Something that's fun in this software is to tune a function. So let's try tuning, wait. Sorry, wrong window. Okay, we have a function like the equal division. We can do this in real time by additioning. Take any number here, say we want equal division of 7 into 34 parts. Now here's what it sounds like. I want it to go beyond an octave. Sounds very similar to 12-tone. What's different is it doesn't have a pure octave. So it's a lot of fun to just plug in different numbers and play around and see what it sounds like. And you can come up with a scale that you may have never thought of otherwise, just because you like the way it sounds.
It's so much fun to watch you demonstrate all these cool things. So much fun.
Well, I hope that you would download it and try it out yourself, and you come up with things that I wouldn't come up with. So I better move on to the next program, which is very similar to this one. It's also an editor, but this is an editor for this keyboard, the tonal plexus. So I hope you see after the explanation of the theory that the instruments and software are representative of a larger idea. So here we have the larger idea being that division of 41 tones then that is tuned in divisions of 5 just noticeable differences results in this particular structure. Now I'll turn on live input and select the Uplexus input, and then we should be able to play. All right, so you can see here, I hope, a basic piano pattern, the white keys and black keys. There are 12 columns, and each column is divided into a series of regions. Those regions are of different colors. When they're not white or black, they're gray or they're colored. Each change in color on the edges is a different octave here. And so I can play, I can't really see what I'm doing from this angle. But
each little step up the column is 6 cents, right?
Yeah, one just noticeable difference. It's a higher octave.
So we have 205 equal divisions of the octave.
205 equal divisions,
That's
which
41 times 5.
correct, and every position, every one of those keys has a specific theoretical name. All intervals are ratios of just intonation, and they have names. So there's a complete literacy and also music notation that corresponds directly to this. All of the same features I demonstrated in the other software are also here, plus interesting things specific to tonal plexus keyboards, such as showing different patterns on the keyboard. This pattern represents the major triad in just intonation. So the major third, actually these, the structure of the keyboard outlines these patterns. The 3 types of major thirds in the major third family, large, small, and Pythagorean. These can play automatically, and I just... So I can click. And this gets a lot more fun when we add more notes.
Maybe a Hendrix chord, if you can add one.
There we go. Now you see that the overall pattern does change at the edges. Okay, so it's not such an easy task to play the instrument. You have to know where things are going to change at the edges. But every interval has two patterns. It's just when you start combining more intervals, the patterns will change more radically.
Maybe you can twist it up into a helix like Mons did, so that one can play a cylindrical instrument like so.
The technology doesn't allow that at this point, but maybe at some point in the future we could do that with some kind of conductive elastomer, I would guess. So other things that can be shown. Let's move on to the next program. Okay,
This will be the final one, right? Scordatura.
It can be, although if we're short on time, I'd like to show the ear training software.
Okay, but in a few minutes' time.
Yep, just quickly to show you what this does. We have the notation, we also have intervals and pitches. Okay, so the systematically defined interval names are all there. You can have a root, which is a random. And then test yourself on the identification of these sounds, which of course is something musicians do normally, but with a more limited range. There are games that can be played. We'll play a racing game and see how good we are. What does it sound like?
SM6. SM6?
I don't think so.
S5.
Yeah.
I'm getting lost in the naming convention. It's a -6 sort of thing.
It's smaller though. The smaller one.
That's what, a half tone.
Yes, but how big is it?
SM2, I think.
You think this one?
Perhaps.
It's larger.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the point of the software, that you would be able to test yourself on these things. And then you can review your progress. So review your performance, their percentages and things like this. There are different licenses for this software so that there can be an administrator who can see the range of progress for students using the software, etc. There are also, I did want to show this because I spent some time with Omer on a maqam melody. There are chords here. So it's similar to what we saw before. You can see all the notation for the melody. See what you think of this one. Okay, so the rhythmic notation obviously doesn't exist in this program, but if I can take just a moment to show a program that does include this. I spent some time working out a notation software package, which I had to abandon because the framework broke. But here we have etc. You can just this is
the musical genius there.
it's polyphonic, so no problem adding another line. It's obviously not music, but you get the idea. So this one you can download and play around with that one for free as well. let's take a look at Scordatura. This was a software package actually suggested by Dr. Yarman, and I began programming this, I think, 4 years ago, and in constant communication with Ozan.
3 to 4 years, perhaps 3 maybe. Okay.
Maybe we can use Scordatura to play a piece of music. Would this be a good idea?
Yes, it could
Okay.
be.
All right, so here is a particular tuning which has maqam-like qualities, dividing the octave into 8 equal parts. We'll see if we can pull this up
So
here.
Scordatura morphs an already existing notation through sound fonts.
Thank you, yes, correct. So the name implies historically that the written pitch does not correspond to the sounding pitch. That is the basic principle that's used here. So I have a project that's already set up, and when I press play, I should hear some music. But I don't. So let me see. It's got the wrong input.
Yeah, you need to reconnect within the software.
Again,
Scordatura.
we had everything set up and then rebooted. This is what happens. Okay. Now let me see. All right. All right, so a short prelude for organ in this tuning, 8 tones per octave.
Tuned by Scordatura. Can you show the Scordatura window at the same time? Bravo. Bravo.
Teşekkürler.
This holy Johann Sebastianish prelude would better perhaps conclude because it is a marvelous presentation demonstrating Aaron Andrew Hunt's most worthy efforts in producing software and hardware that assists the microtonal composer. Yes, that's
I
the
just wanted to show some things that are similar to other software that you've seen here. You can create these shapes and you can define them yourself and arrange them. They're just objects you can create and move around. And so you can do whatever you want with this, create hexagonal things,
Okay.
etc.
Okay. We congratulate these meticulous workers who created hardware and software serving microtonality, and we applaud their efforts from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you.
Okay. A few questions for Aaron. We will have just a short time. Aaron Andrew Hunt için soruları olan, evet. Profesör Tolga Yarman.
I'm delighted and I'm...
Türkçe.
Pardon. Tamam peki.
Either way.
Okay. Her halükarda çok mutlu oldum. Bundan önceki konuşmayı ve konserde kaçırdığım için üzgünüm. Maalesef bir vefat haberi dolayısıyla çıkmak zorunda oldum. Her halükarda tebrik ediyorum Erhan'ı. Beni şu esas itibariyle biraz meraklandırıyor. Acaba kaç tondan ibaret olacağını sistemin acaba kaç tondan ibaret olacağını nasıl belirliyor? Yani orada tamamen bir keyfilik mi var? Yoksa belli sayıdaki tonlar itibariyle dizileri belirlerken biraz sihirli diyeceğimiz perde sayıları mı söz konusu? Yani 31 dedi mesela. İşte 79'un nereden geldiğini iyi kötü anlıyoruz sevgili Ozan'ın yaptıkları itibariyle. Ama buradaki sistemlerin matematiksel olarak bakıldığında perde sayısı tamamen keyfi olarak gözetilebilir mi, yoksa birçok doğanın içinden geldiği şekliyle sihirli sayılabilecek diziler yahut sihirli sayıdaki perdelerden oluşan diziler mi söz konusu diyebilir miyiz? Bu bence çok büyüleyici bir matematiksel tartışma konusu ama yani ilk bakışta gördüğüm kadarıyla ne dersin Aaron?
Okay, first, just to be sure, the question was for me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so some of the mathematics in question, they're actually very simple. The structures that's produced by continuing powers of 3. These graphic images show what happens when you use this process and take it beyond the normal limitation. So the seven tones that are most common that have the letter names given to them are based on the same process, the most basic process in scale generation. And we can continue this process to create the larger scales. Those that become significant are scales in which the tones at the end start to do funny things. They create intervals that start to disappear because they're so small. So 31, 19, these are the numbers that we see popping up when we do this process. The next one gets bigger. So here you can keep track of all the numbers, but the basic thing is you're looking at pitches that are generated using this very simple premise, this procedure, and then just seeing what happens. It just so happens that every cycle of 12 from this prime number, we get 19, 31, 43, etc., or 41 and 53. So I hope does that speak to your question?
Joe Monzo will like to fill in the details here.
Yes, I just wanted to point out what Aaron is talking about is when you base the system on using powers of 3.
Yep.
If you choose to use a different generator, which is not what we do in regular Western, or actually most music around the world, but if you do use a different generator, you get different numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers that you get depend on what you use to generate your scale.
Ben de burada Türkçe'de bir katkıda bulunayım. I'm going to add something in Turkish for them to understand in Turkish terminology. Şimdi bu beşli aralığı 3/2 oranında tutulursa ve bir başlangıç perdesinden hareketle tiz istikamette, pez istikamette yığılmaya başlanıp daha sonra bir oktav sahası içerisine doluşturulursa görülecektir ki bu beşliler zinciriyle hiçbir şekilde bir çember elde edilip başlanılan sese geri dönülemez. Ama yakın gelinebilir. Mesela 41 ses dönüp dolaşıp çok yakına düşülebilir. 53 ses dönüp dolaşılıp yakınına düşülebilir. Çok daha yukarılarda 666 tur atıldığında neredeyse aynı noktaya düşülür. Fakat hiçbir zaman teorik olarak aynı sese gelinmez ve bu yüzden çember döne döne döne sonsuza kadar gider. Yani çember oluşturmaz, spiral halinde sonsuza kadar akar gider. Halbuki ATAER'ın ortaya koyduğu sistemde ancak duyulabilir, JND diye gösterdiği, ancak duyulabilir küçük aralıklar 6 sent kadar ortalama alınmış olduğundan bu sınırlama çerçevesinde bu beşlilerin iyi kötü tam temsil edilebileceği, 3/2'ye çok yakın olabileceği en düşük çözünürlüklü döngü olarak 41 ton eşit taksimat seçilmektedir. 41 ton eşit taksimatla ana daire ele alındıktan sonra iç içe bunun gibi eşit aralıklı 5 adet daha daire, 41 sesli daire yerleştirmek suretiyle 205 perdeden oluşan, oktavda 205 adet perdeden oluşan bir yapı ortaya çıkmaktadır. Orada notasyonu tutarlı yerleştirebilmek üzere, bu sesleri notasyonda tutarlı temsil edebilmek üzere portayı nasıl bölmek gerekir, diyezi bemolü nasıl kullanmak gerekir gösterdi. Burada sizin sorunuz bu beşlilerle ilgili olarak idiyse cevabı buydu.
Bu açıklama çok doyurucu oldu. Teşekkür ediyorum. Şimdi ATAER'ın baktığı açı itibariyle acaba musikinin matematiksel tamamiyetini, yani mathematical completeness, I'm saying this for the translator.
ATAER is actually implementing that mathematical completeness.
Fine. Yeah, no, I just spelled it out for our translator. ATAER'ın baktığı açı itibariyle bir de bir iklim dünyasının, yani müzikte bir iklim dünyasının matematiksel tamamiyetinin olması önem taşıyor ki sevgili Ozan'ın tutkusu bunu musiki için gerçekleştirmekti. Yani hangi perdeden başlanırsa başlansın herhangi bir ezgiyi o iklime ait olduğu söylenebilecek icra edebiliyor olmaktadır. Şimdi bu ATAER'ın baktığı açıdan acaba sevgili Ozan'ın musikideki matematiksel tamamiyetini bu çerçevede nereye koyacağız? Perhaps Ozan would help the translation as well a little bit.
Okay, let Ozan say something about this, but let me answer first. It's a very good question, and I think the relationship between these two endeavors is this, that Ozan knows the particular characteristics, the historical, rhetorical significance of Turkish music more insightfully than most, has studied it in depth in its tuning structures. And so this is very specific to that music. What I've done is something that's very general and can apply to any tuning, although it is, of course, from historically biased from the Western point of view, it is also based on the simplest processes for creating a musical system. That can be argued, but the number 3 being the first new pitch, which can create a cycle, is what I mean by the simplest, and the octave being the simplest harmonic interval. So where I'm coming from a position of theoretical abstraction, he's coming from a position of theoretical significance historically. And the two can meet. There's 2 ways to describe what's happening. His system can be described in my system. In that way, it relates it to every other tone system, because any system can be described using what I've created here. His system is very specific, and it should remain that way. So we have different kinds of tools. The specific tools are better for each specific thing, and yet a way to connect everything is also very valuable.
Okay. We'll discuss this later on. Just one final question, and we are going to take a break. One final question. Room for one more. Bir soru daha alabilecek yerimiz var. Okay. Now we are going to take our coffee break, and we'll reconvene here for an open forum with all our participants. Thank you.